Hi again, everyone. I'm Gary, and this is the second video of Powered by JEM, a series where I explain the mechanics and the thoughts that have gone into my role-playing system, Journeyman Expert Master. Now, today we're going to create characters together, so you can see how the characters your players are going to come up with come together as a kind of mixture of heritages and talents. And there's two fully realized example settings in the book: heroic fantasy and Lovecraftian horror, which I talked through last time a little bit. And today we're going to create an investigator for the latter setting, a Lovecraftian horror investigator. Now, as you can see, creating characters is a 7-step process. It doesn't take overly long to create a character for GEM, and I definitely say it's on the shorter end of character creation processes for kind of modern role-playing games. It's like that by design. Characters in GEM are, regardless of the kind of setting, or at least in the two example settings, they're really mortal, especially at lower levels, and especially in Lovecraftian horror, where that kind of like mortality never really goes away. Because, you know, in my opinion, dungeon fantasy and Lovecraftian horror should have at least a reasonable chance of death continuously. Death is going to happen. So if you're going to have death in your game, you kind of better hope that the character creation doesn't take an age, because you're going to be annoyed when your level 1 wizard gets cut down by orcs in the second room of the dungeon and you suddenly need a new PC, right? So the character creation process, while it isn't as short as some games, some really rules-like games, it's pretty short. It doesn't take too long. So before we start, let's just take a quick look at the character sheet available for GEM. There's two included for each of the example settings. There's one that just has simple test target numbers and one that has graduated test target numbers. You don't really need to know the difference. We're just going to use the basic one. And then, hopefully, looking at this character sheet, you can see immediately all of the information that you might possibly need. You've got your core attributes down the left-hand side, which is where they kind of are in Dungeon Fantasy games. And the columns for all the skills. You know, I've said in the last video, I really like skill-based games. GEM's a skill-based game. There's loads of skills to look at in the center. Some of them have multiple entries, as you might be able to see. That allows, because some skills have multiple specialisms, like drive auto, drive horse-drawn, for example, or firearms rifle, firearms shotgun, for example. And then in the center, there's your listing for your FP and your HP, which is really important, right? And there's also a place for drained conditions, how many you've got of those. And also whether you've taken a short rest that day. Generally, you can only short rest once per day, and then you've got to do an extended rest. And then there's also, on the right-hand side, there's the thing that you're going to refer to most, or your players are going to refer to most, and that's your target numbers, the number on the D20 that they need to succeed at a test, depending on their proficiency level. Now, if we just flip over, on the back side of the sheet, on the reverse side of the sheet, there's space for your talents on the right-hand side, as well as your supernatural abilities. Supernatural abilities, turns out you won't actually have any of those, or very few of those, if you're playing Lovecraftian horror. Your character might get spells at a higher level, but generally they're not going to use that section too much. And then you've got a large block for your carrying capacity slots. And carrying capacity is determined by your strength. Everything, it's a slot-based inventory. Everything takes up one slot unless the DM says otherwise, in which case you might be able to stack things into your inventory. So, for example, in Dungeon Fantasy and Heroic Fantasy, coins, you can stack 100 of them in one slot. Nothing ever takes up more than one slot as well. That's a good rule to remember. So let's have a look at step 1, choosing a heritage. As I said last time, heritages in fantasy, they are your species. But because we're creating a Lovecraftian horror, let's have a look at the Lovecraftian horror heritages. Now, they're effectively, in this particular version of the game, this setting, they're a character's initial social standing in their lives up to this point. So they're working class, middle class, or upper class. And it broadly defines a character's initial wealth and education, as well as their access to a couple of other skills like foreign languages. I think my character, I was thinking about what character to make, and I think we should make a middle-class doctor, kind of an English guy in his mid-40s, worked as a GP in a kind of sleepy southern county before being drawn into the world of the mythos. So we're going to create an English doctor. Now, as you can see, my heritage gives me a movement of 30 feet around and 24 miles a day, and is medium size. This is actually the same for all Lovecraftian heritages. It's just that in some games, like fantasy, dwarfs, for example, might be of different speed and size. I get to choose 2 core attributes to increase to trained and 1 to put a journeyman. I think I put my intellect up to journeyman. I think that makes sense if I'm playing a doctor. And then I think I put my personality up. He's the kind of guy who's had to spend a lot of time talking to patients. And then agility, which also kind of defines manual dexterity. That might be quite interesting. And then I get to choose my starting skills based on the starting skills for this heritage. I get to choose 3 skills from the listed skill pool to put up to train. So I'm going to choose admin, education, and persuasion. I think they make the most sense. And then I also get to put his wealth up to trained. So his wealth automatically goes up. Wealth determines how much money you can spend per day before you have to track it, basically. I get to choose one to put up to Journeyman. I think I'm at that search. He's used to like examining people for their ailments. So why not, make that transferable to scenes of mystery and horror as well. Then for the last 2 entries, I get to put up 2 more to train or take a heritage talent. I'm going to take 1 heritage talent and put 1 of them up to train. So I think put fast talk up to trained. Fast talk is a character's ability to kind of like, bluff their way quickly through a situation. And then for the final one, I'm going to take a heritage talent. Because he's in his 40s, I'm thinking this doctor's in his 40s, I reckon he probably fought in the First World War. So I'm going to take the heritage talent, a veteran of the Great War as that. It prevents him from having to make a save versus stability when he sees corpses or can have like mutilation, and it also increases his starting stability really slightly. Okay, step 2, let's choose an experience path. Well, we'll choose an experience path together. There's 2 available in the game, and they both require the same XP to level up. All they are, and I said this in the first video, is they just affect your target numbers. There's a Jack, who's untrained is slightly better than the specialist untrained, but all his other skills are kind of slightly worse, and the specialists are the opposite, right? They're really bad at untrained things, but they're slightly better at everything they've got any training in. Now, I imagine that our doctor's going to have a fairly broad field of interest, so I'm going to go Jack. I think probably when starting characters, if you're making characters as a group or if you're making characters for your players to have a go with, I just choose everyone Jack. It just keeps everything nice and simple. Now, this gives me all his starting numbers, his HP, his FP, and importantly, it gives us his target numbers for his skills: 15 if he's untrained, 13 if he's trained, 12 if he's journeyman, etc. That's the number that he needs to roll on a d20 to pass in those skills, right? I'll put his XP in for the next level now too, which is actually slightly lower than 1500 because he gets a discount due to his high intellect. So he actually only needs 1425 to get to level 2. Now, let's choose some starting talents. Now, we're on to the really fun part. Talents are what makes this game fun. It's what, gives the player a sense of where they're going with their character. Lots of customization. Now, every character, regardless of the setting in JEM, starts with 2 talents. And whatever they choose as their first talent determines a bunch of extra stuff for us. It's really important that they think about that first talent a little bit. Now, I've already said I want this guy to be a doctor, so I'm going to go to the talent tree for physician. You can see there's loads of talents that form part of this tree. There's loads of career trees. There's, one for police, one for academics, librarians, politicians, etc., etc. Obviously, we're going to look at the physician one. Now, you've already got to start at the bottom of the tree and work your way up. So I'm going to say that, the first talent I'm going to choose, obviously, is physician intern, the very bottom. So if we go to that talent, we can see that it gives us +1 proficiency in the healing skill, provided we haven't already got that, which we don't, so we'll add it. And now we get all these extra juicy things, right? Because it's our character's first talent. I get +2 in any skill from the talent tree skill pool, which I'll look at in a minute. And then +1 in admin, education, science with a specialism in biology, and wealth. So he's pretty educated, actually, pretty wealthy, which makes sense. I also get $200 to use on starting equipment. So I'll just update these skills and then choose 2 from the skill pool that I mentioned. From that skill pool, I think I'll take driver auto and language other French. I like to imagine that he picked up a bit of French while serving in the trenches during the First World War. Now, for my second talent, I could move up this physician tree, and that brings me to medic. I don't get a choice; it's just the next one that's available. But I already decided that I want my doctor to have like a really wide kind of set of interests. So I like to imagine he plays sports on the weekend, maybe a bit of cricket or tennis. So looking at there's a bunch of personal interest talent trees. I'm going to take sporting dabbler from the sports tree, the bottom one of that. This gives me +1 in any 2 skills from the sports skill pool. I'm going to take dodge and throwing because they're always a useful pair of skills, and I think that kind of best summarises what I've just said about him wanting to be good at cricket and wanting to play cricket and tennis. Then we'll note starting equipment. Now, my temptation is to buy a firearm, but I'm not going to because this is the UK. Where this guy's from, it wouldn't make sense for him to be kind of wandering around with a firearm. So instead, I don't want to get him much. I'll buy a suit and dress shoes. That's $30. A pocket watch for $35, and a briefcase, which I imagine he's going to put all of those stuff in, for $1.50. That makes him basically ready to go. And you can see that it goes into these carrying capacity slots. And I'll just X off the ones at the bottom that is not strong enough to use. So there's 20 on the sheet, and because he is untrained in strength, it means he gets 10 of those. You get an extra 2 for every proficiency level you take in strength. Then step 5 and 6, nice and easy. Note HP and FP. I can note those down quite easily, and then just fill in any of these other numbers that are required. And then step 7. Now I'm finally going to give him a name, something suitably middle class for a 1920s England. I think Howard Moore, Dr. Moore. Yeah, that sounds nice and suitably like nondescript. Now that just about finishes it off, the creation of that character. Nice and easy, didn't take long. A PDF of Howard, by the way, is in the description if you want it, along with a link to the book and the character sheets. I hope you found it useful and interesting, and please come back later when I kind of start to get into the more nitty-gritty details of this system. But until then, I will see you later. Thank you.